When survival becomes the only strategy, why Black women's entrepreneurship is not what you think. Good evening. I recently had the privilege of sitting down with Tenni DeCoste, a woman whose work is quietly reshaping how we understand resilience, equity, and the cost of survival in America. Tenni is not just an advocate, she is a disruptor. She is a truth teller. She is a mirror reflecting back to us the uncomfortable realities we would rather ignore about who gets left behind, who gets pushed out, and who is forced to rebuild from scratch over and over and over again. Her insights challenge the narratives we have been sold about empowerment, entrepreneurship, and what it really means to thrive in a system designed to exhaust you. Tennille's impact on making the world a better place is undeniable. She is creating pathways where there were none. She is amplifying voices that have been silenced. She is demanding accountability from systems that have operated in the shadows for far too long. Today, I want to share what I learned from Tanil because it is a story that demands to be told. And it is a story that will change the way you see strength, softness, and survival. Let me start with something that might surprise you. When we talk about Black women starting businesses at record rates, we celebrate it. We call it empowerment. We call it ambition. We call it the American dream in action. And yes, there is truth in that. But here is what we do not talk about. For many Black women, entrepreneurship is not a choice born from passion or opportunity. It is a pivot born from necessity. It is what happens when the doors you have been knocking on for years suddenly slam shut. It is what happens when the systems that promise stability, advancement, and fairness reveal themselves to be anything but. Tanil shared with me a reality that most people are not paying attention to. Over 300,000 Black women have lost their jobs this year alone. 300,000. Let that sink in for a moment. These are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. These are not just statistics in a report. These are mothers, leaders, educators, healthcare workers, professionals who have spent decades building careers in sectors that are now cutting them loose without a second thought. Government jobs, nonprofit roles, education, care work, the very industries where Black women have been overrepresented are the same industries that are now disproportionately laying them off. And when you dig deeper, you start to see the pattern, the rollback of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, the quiet dismantling of programs that were supposed to level the playing field, the return to hiring practices that favor the familiar, the comfortable, the safe, which almost never includes Black women. So when we see headlines celebrating the rise of Black women entrepreneurs, we need to ask ourselves a harder question. Are they starting businesses because they want to or because they have no other option? Let me tell you about Fajani Cadet. Fajani was the director of diversity and inclusion at a global research and advisory firm. She was not just educated, and she was highly educated. She was not just experienced, she was deeply experienced. She was passionate about advancing equity in corporate spaces. She was doing the work that everyone said needed to be done. She was building bridges. She was creating opportunities. She was holding organizations accountable. And then, in the wave of DEI rollbacks sweeping across industries in 2025, she was laid off. Just like that. Her expertise, irrelevant. Her dedication, meaningless. Her years of service, forgotten. She found herself suddenly unemployed, anxious about her financial future, and uncertain about what came next in a climate where the very work she had dedicated her life to was being erased. But here is what Fajani did. She refused to disappear. She leaned on her network. She sought retraining opportunities. She explored consulting. And eventually, she launched her own consultancy, helping organizations rebuild the inclusive cultures they had so carelessly dismantled. She became a vocal advocate for data driven accountability in corporate DEI efforts. She turned her displacement into a platform for change. And she is not alone. Fajani is one of thousands of Black women who have been forced to reinvent themselves, not because they wanted a fresh start, but because the system gave them no choice. Think about what that means for a moment. Fajani did everything right. She got the degrees, she built the experience, she showed up with excellence every single day, and still she was pushed out. Still, she had to start over. Still, she had to prove her worth all over again. And the most heartbreaking part, she is not an exception, she is the rule. Now, wait, shut, shut. Let me share something even more striking. A LinkedIn survey of more than 200 Black women who were laid off in 2025 found that 59% of them started businesses or freelance work. 59%. Another 30% pursued retraining or went back to school. These women were not sitting around waiting for the next opportunity to knock. They were not wallowing in self pity. They were not giving up. They were creating their own doors. They were building their own tables. They were rewriting their own narratives. But here's the part that should make us all uncomfortable. 60% of those surveyed reported experiencing workplace discrimination, 60%. And only 21% felt they had strong prospects for advancement in traditional employment. 21%. Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. These are mid career professionals, women who have proven themselves over and over and over again, women who have led teams, women who have managed budgets, women who have driven results, women who have exceeded every expectation placed upon them. And yet they are being told implicitly and explicitly that there is no room for them at the table. So they are building their own tables. They are launching businesses. They are freelancing. They are retraining for entirely new industries. And they are doing it while navigating biased hiring systems, AI driven resume screening that filters them out before a human ever sees their qualifications, and a labor market that continues to undervalue their contributions. This is not empowerment, this is survival. And we need to stop confusing the two. But here's where the story gets even more complex, even more painful, even more infuriating. Because while Black women are being pushed out of traditional employment, they are also being shut out of leadership. A 2025 report by the Women Business Collaborative found that women now hold an average of only 9.2% of CEO roles across major US companies. 9.2%. And Black women, their representation is even lower, so low that it barely registers. The pipeline to executive leadership is not just thin, it is nearly non existent. And yet, the same report shows that companies with gender diverse executive teams report stronger financial performance, greater innovation, and better adaptability in changing markets. In other words, the very leaders that organizations need most are the ones they are systematically excluding. Let that irony sit with you for a moment. The very people who could save these organizations, who could innovate them into the future, who could lead them through complexity and change, are the same people being shown the door. So, what does all of this mean? It means that the narrative we have been telling ourselves about progress, about opportunity, about meritocracy, is incomplete at best and dishonest at worst. It means that Black women are not failing to advance because they lack ambition, education, or skill. They are being blocked by systems that were never designed to let them in. And when those systems fail them, they are forced to create their own paths, often at great personal and financial cost. But here's what Tennille wants us to understand. This is not just a story about struggle. It is also a story about resilience. It is a story about community. It is a story about Black women who refuse to be erased, who refuse to be silenced, who refuse to accept the limitations that have been placed on them. These women are leaning on faith, family, and professional networks. They are supporting one another. They are advocating for policy change. They are raising awareness about systemic inequities. They are rebuilding not just their own lives, but entire local economies. They are proving once again that when the system fails you, you do not give up. You build something better. And that is the counterintuitive truth at the heart of this conversation. We have been taught to believe that entrepreneurship is the ultimate expression of freedom and choice. But for many Black women, it is the only option left after every other door has been closed. We celebrate their resilience, and we should. But we also need to ask ourselves why they are being forced to be so resilient in the first place. Why are we asking Black women to constantly rebuild, reinvent, and restart instead of creating systems that support them from the beginning? Why are we applauding their ability to survive instead of demanding that they be allowed to thrive? Tennille's work is a call to action. It is a reminder that resilience is not a substitute for justice. It is a reminder that we cannot celebrate Black women's entrepreneurship without also confronting the systemic failures that made it necessary. It is a reminder that true empowerment is not about giving people the tools to survive in a broken system. It is about fixing the system so that survival is no longer the only option. So, here is what I want you to take away from this conversation. First, systemic inequities are actively pushing Black women out of stable employment. This is not an accident. It is not a coincidence. It is a pattern. And it is happening right now in real time in every industry, in every sector. Second, entrepreneurship among Black women is surging, not just from aspiration but from necessity. And we need to honor that truth, even when it makes us uncomfortable, especially when it makes us uncomfortable. And third, resilience and community are foundational to recovery and progress. But resilience should not be the only strategy. We need structural change. We need accountability. We need systems that work for everyone, not just the people who have always had access. And so I leave you with this. What will you do? Not tomorrow, not next week, not when it is convenient. What will you do today? How will you use your platform or influence, no matter how big or small, to challenge systemic barriers and intentionally create spaces where Black women are not just included, but empowered to lead, innovate, and thrive? Because the truth is, we all have a role to play, whether you are a hiring manager, a CEO, a colleague, a mentor, a friend, or simply someone who cares about justice. You have the power to make a difference. You have the power to open doors. You have the power to amplify voices. You have the power to advocate for change. You have the power to stop celebrating survival and start demanding that everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Stop applauding resilience as if it is a virtue when it is actually a symptom. Stop celebrating entrepreneurship as if it is always a choice, when for many it is the last resort. Stop pretending that progress is happening when the data tells a completely different story. Start asking the hard questions. Start holding systems accountable. Start creating the change that Black women have been begging for, fighting for, dying for. Tennille DeCoste is showing us the way. Now it is up to us to follow, not with words, not with empty promises, but with action, real, tangible, measurable action. The kind of action that dismantles barriers, the kind of action that opens doors, the kind of action that says unequivocally that Black women deserve more than survival. They deserve to thrive. and we will not rest until that is the reality. Thank you.